Welcome to Voice of America. Today we'll be discussing about Pakistan's economy and 24th IMF program Pakistan has just received last week. How this program would be different than the last 23 programs, and would this program be the last for Pakistan as claimed by the Premier of Pakistan and the Finance Minister? We'll be discussing this with IMF's Mission Chief in Pakistan, Nathan Porter. He's joining us today. Thank you so much, Nathan. Pakistan's Premier and Finance Minister, they are saying this would be the last program with IMF. How you believe that would be the last program given the situation what we have seen of the economy today and in comparison to the last 23 programs?
I think maybe the place to begin is that over the last year, the last 12 months, stability has been restored in Pakistan. It's a very welcome event. And I think the turnaround has been remarkably rapid given the extent of volatility and uncertainty in the middle of 2023. And this provides a good basis to move forward. And I think the core aspects of this program will try and ensure that Pakistan will maintain undertaking sound macro exchange rate, fiscal and monetary policies, which will ensure that we don't, or that Pakistan does not repeat the history of boom-bust cycles, and then building on this sense of stability through reforms to liberalize and develop and build a resilient, strong, private-led growth where the benefits can be shared more broadly. And that would be the basis on which this could be the last program.
So what was different in last 23 programs, and when we are looking at the progress, why Pakistan could not come out of IMF's program? Would it be on IMF that the prescription IMF offered was not followed? This is how you would translate it, or were there some real structural issues that IMF could not gauge them?
Okay, I think there are two key differences. So one, as I said, we start from a point of stability. And I think importantly, this program has been designed with some different elements. So I think really there is a focus on building and creating the conditions for a more vibrant private sector. And I think underpinning that, and so by doing this, there should be able to be a path to more productive enterprises, which should lead to ongoing growth. I think the sort of reforms that need to happen are sort of moving away from the reliance on subsidies and concessions and protection, which have ultimately trapped resources in unproductive activities, and to also have a reduction in the borrowing requirement to create more space for good private investment. There also needs to be a greater investment in the Pakistani people, in being able to build human capital, and through better health and education programs to deal with, which will improve both the livelihood of many, many Pakistanis, but also create a potential labor force which can operate in a modern economy. So I think through a series of these efforts, which this program is built around, we can move in this direction.
So considering the private investments or investments in general, the foreign direct investments and otherwise investments in Pakistan, how comfortable IMF is with the policies Pakistan has right now for investments?
Well, as I said, I think a key change has to be to move away from a focus on import substitution as the way to growth, and to one where the economy is more open and more dynamic. And I think what that means is being able to remove the protection and the incentives that have left a lot of resources in unproductive activities. I think trade liberalization should also be a key priority going forward to make sure, which will ultimately help exporters and pretty much all Pakistanis in reducing their costs.
So is Pakistan doing it right?
Well, I think this program and the program the authorities have agreed to lays out an agenda which could put the country on the right track if it's implemented.
So we are talking about devolution of the ministries, the federal government's ministries to the provinces after post-constitutional 18th Constitution Amendment. 150,000 jobs over the weekend, what we actually have seen, would be vacant, and government is devolving 6 ministries, sending it to the provinces. How exactly you think this restructuring or right-sizing of the government is on the right track?
So, as you mentioned, the right-sizing that's undertaken, that the federal government is undertaking, is part of aligning the relative activities between the provinces and the federal government as articulated or as required by the 18th Constitutional Amendment. And I think, so effectively the decision for this to happen was taken when the 18th Constitutional Amendment was passed. It's not a decision today. I think the federal government is just moving to align its activities with that.
So when we actually talk to any Pakistani in general, the common perception is that whatever the burden they are facing today, or the financial burden, is due to IMF conditionalities. Is it, when we look at that, what is that IMF program seem to unjustly burden the people who are most vulnerable?
So I think there's a couple of things. So an IMF program is designed to correct and improve a situation. We don't make programs to make things worse. And in doing that, it is normally in response to some underlying problem. So, for instance, when electricity prices and tariffs did not keep up with costs, there was CD, and then you saw generators going offline and load shedding. And so there has to be a plan to make the sector sustainable, and ultimately the relief will come from reforms which bring down the cost structure. I think when there's attempts to maintain an overly strong rupee, it undermines competitiveness of Pakistani industry. And when there's been a boom-bust cycle where that creates inflation and a very large current account, unfortunately there needs to be adjustment. So all of these, when Pakistan ends up in these difficult positions, we come in to try and help. And I think we've actually seen that over the last year. We've seen a return to growth. I see it also in the first quarter. There is a strengthening of growth again. Inflation is coming down dramatically. The pressure on the currency has been significantly reduced, and also reserves have more than doubled, which make Pakistan stronger. So ultimately, I think the support we provide and the policy support and with the strong implementation of the authorities has put Pakistan in a better position, and now we need to grow from there.
All right, when we are talking about the subsidies and we are talking about the support prices for agriculture sector, for instance, is IMF concerned about the support prices? IMF wants that to be taken out of the equation. If that would happen, how exactly farmers would be kind of dealing with that kind of situation, because especially all those who have smaller holdings of land in Pakistan?
I think, look, Pakistan has already liberalized some agricultural markets and done so successfully. So maize is an example. I think we see there to be scope for continuing this, and in fact this is part of the program. And I think what is probably true, what it seems to be true is, or the evidence suggests, is that the support price schemes actually benefit not the small farmers, but the rich, larger farmers. And the smaller farmers are really left in a difficult position. And I think the other thing is, I think what we've seen is that these schemes tend to end up with hidden debt, debt that, say, the provinces have struggled to pay. And So in many ways, and actually, I think in this last year, the support price scheme probably increased the cost of flour to people. So in many ways, it is not a one-way street. It certainly has disadvantages, and I think we've seen successful liberalisation in other parts of the agricultural sector, and there's no reason why that can't work in wheat and other places.
So when we're looking at Pakistan's program again, going back to that, because Finance Minister said IMF was more stricter this time to Pakistan in terms of conditions. Was that right?
So all IMF programs, as I said, are designed to fix the particular external sector viability problem facing the country at the time. And there's no difference in this program. So in that sense, it's not stricter. I think, though, the thing to keep in mind is that the position Pakistan was in when we started this last program was very much one where inflation was running very high, a large current account deficit, almost no growth. And so the conditions then were to stabilize that situation, and that succeeded. And looking into this program, in many ways, we just want to continue the progress there and then build on to create the conditions for stronger growth, which will be more resilient. And that'll be good for everybody.
So when we are talking about Chinese loans for Pakistan, there is an understanding and there is some specific focus on that. Even Pakistani team, Prime Minister and Finance Minister, they've highlighted that IMF is concerned about Chinese loans, and IMF wanted Pakistan to get some restructuring or renegotiation or rollovers on Chinese loans. Is that, because there is another theory with that as well, that is like US is trying to reduce the Chinese influence on Pakistan, and IMF is being used as a tool. How do you respond to that?
So there was nothing different or special or particular about our approach to China or any other member. I think China is one of Pakistan's key partners, strongest partners, and it is one of the largest bilateral creditors to Pakistan. But I think what we want and what we try and support is to have a program that can underpin investment and financial support from a broad spectrum of partners. China's one, but so are all of Pakistan's other major partners.
So is Pakistan's debt unmanageable at this stage? It needs restructuring, and if that happens, how exactly that would pan?
Yeah, so we assess Pakistan's debt as being sustainable. It's true, it's high, and the biggest challenge are the gross financing needs, so the very short-term nature of the debt. But it's sustainable under a framework in which this program is implemented faithfully. And it is true that Pakistan has a very high debt and debt service ratio to revenue, and that reflects how remarkably low Pakistan's tax to GDP ratio is. And in this program, a large emphasis is placed on generating additional revenue, and that's by administration and compliance, and make people who should currently be pay taxes. It is through efforts to broaden the taxes to areas that have been undertaxed, which would include property, agriculture, and retailers. And by doing this, it will make the system fairer and more efficient. And ultimately, I think a key objective would be to be able to generate sufficient revenue so that more regressive taxation can be reduced. And in this last budget, the effort was commenced with exporters and and developers being moved away out of special regimes into the regular regime. And just on the debt point, I think the other two areas which we continue to focus on are the quality of spending, investment, and as I mentioned, the importance of development spending, and also the importance, given high gross financing needs, of a debt management strategy.
There was a certain talk in town in Pakistan, back home in Islamabad as well, that IMF has some concerns on special economic zones and NFC awards, the way it's been distributed.
Sorry, the second?
The NFC award?
NFC.
So,
okay.
Is that right? And how those can be addressed by Pakistan government?
So on special economic zones, I think this comes back to the broader point about what it would take to build a productive, competitive Pakistan. And as I mentioned, and I think in our staff report, which should be released soon, there's a greater elaboration on this point. But I think the basic idea is that providing subsidies and concessions ultimately leads to inefficient enterprises, and resources stay there, and so that basically undercuts the prospects for growth. And I think we're all fine for there to be both domestic and foreign investment, and I think we're fully supportive of that. But it is investment that comes without the need for concessions and incentives, and the government is there to provide sort of basic infrastructure and develop its people so there's a sufficiently skilled labor force.
So when we are looking at construction sector or real estate sector in Pakistan, that has somehow slowed down in last 1 year, 1.5. Is there anything specific Pakistan has prescribed IMF has prescribed Pakistan on construction real estate?
Well, I think the only thing I mentioned is that we think in construction and development that it should be taxed like any other activity. And this is also part of the reason why we see it's important to align, say, agricultural income tax regime with the federal income tax regime, because agricultural income should be treated like any other type of income. But I think as a more general point, and this is not specific to, say, construction or development necessarily, but that the retail market and sector should operate in a competitive and transparent way.
So what could be the GDP which can keep Pakistan afloat, GDP growth rate, when we are talking about? And for how many years they are supposed to continue with that kind of growth, and it won't be a boom and bust cycle again?
Yeah, so I don't think there's a magic number. And in fact, I would say that the quality of growth is at least as important, if not more so, than the rate of growth. And I think this comes back to the point that repeatedly throughout Pakistan's history, governments have tried to push and have easy stimulus and giveaways which create a boom, which ultimately lead to the bust with a massive hangover and the need for a lot of adjustment to bring down a massive current account, to bring down inflation, to restart growth. So that is not the way. And equally, import substitution is not the way to lasting growth. So the real emphasis has to be on the reforms to generate the resources to support the development of infrastructure and a skilled workforce, and improve outcomes for the Pakistani people, but also to be able to build a more productive private sector.
So two things at the very end, what I needed to discuss. One is related to the foreign direct investment. When we are looking at foreign direct investment numbers in Pakistan is, of course, it's a major number of populous countries in the world. The market size is good. The returns are definitely, they're like return on investment is high. Most of the times that's what we are reading in the reports by different players out there. Why Pakistan does not attract that kind of foreign direct investment in Pakistan?
I mean, you're right. Pakistan is a large market and potentially has a large labor force. But I think at times it hasn't been an attractive place to invest. And I think this reflects a number of things. So one is economic volatility that comes almost directly from this penchant for trying to create booms which lead to busts, and that also raises concerns in the minds of investors. I think the need to develop the potential of the Pakistani people, so to have a labour force that can operate in a more modern economy. I think also to right-size the role of the state. So in terms of its role in promoting particular investment, like particular activities through concessions, bringing down the rates of protection, rethinking the role of the government in setting key prices, which I think can also be a concern to investors. So I think and also trying to improve the quality of public services, which also means reforms for state-owned enterprises, privatization of some, and doing deep reforms to address the cost-side pressures on the electricity sector.
So is role of Pakistani government or authorities disturbing the FDI or hindering the FDI?
Well, no. I think the point is to have the basic business environment be conducive and consistent with having productive enterprises.
Going back to IMF's program, when is the first review and what term would be evaluated in that review? When we will be seeing that in front of the board?
So the test date for the first review is in December. I think so. What that likely means, given when we get data, we'll probably be able to go to the board in March or April, assuming all goes well. But as with all Pakistan programs in all countries, the review both looks back at what's happened in the period under review, but also looks forward, so to make sure that the conditions continue to be right to see the prospects for success going forward.
So on external financing, Pakistan did struggle this time to arrange those numbers, what exactly was given from IMF. Was there any commercial banking loans involved in this? Because there is, of course, news out there that Standard Chartered Bank was offered or somehow was approached to bail them out.
So, okay, I would say the process went well, particularly given that a lot of it was over the summer. I think the thing to remember is that the financing is not some number we just make up. This is what we see Pakistan needing to be able to be sustainable going forward. Multilateral partners and bilateral partners provide a lot of financing. I understand there is some commercial bank financing, although to my knowledge, the authorities have not undertaken any loan or borrowing from Standard Chartered. And certainly what has been in the press, around 11% loan, it was certainly not part of anything we asked for.
Thank you so much, Nathan.
Thank you very much.
Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Nathan Portal was here with VOA today, discussed how exactly Pakistan's economy is struggling, and it can be on the path of, if we call it a growth or some stability. That's what we are about to see in future as well. Stay tuned.